Viewer discretion is advised. Previously on Billy the Goat. Hey everybody. Sorry it's been a while. We'll swiftly get into things. Um, Previously I shut down the chat. You'll notice that the chat is open. Any shenanigans and I'll close it. So um, use it respectfully and try not to troll or spam it or whatever. And if you see people that you're not particularly fond of, just let it slide, okay? No point getting into a tizzy about it. Just move on or whatever. So today's stream, look at the title. Are you out of your mind? This could be quite a triggering stream. And there are going to be elements of a little bit of catastrophe, doomer, gloomer, that kind of stuff. But I want to try and bring a little a slight another way of another consideration to factor in with this calamity. So we will be looking at on a societal level, but not so much really. We're going to actually be looking at the individualistic contribution to this collapse, because at the end of the day, it kind of comes back to you as an individual, how it affects you, and what your contributions for it happening. Because do not be fooled into thinking that you yourself are not participants in what is transpiring. We all have our responsibilities, and when we think about the weakest link, ultimately that will come down to we ourselves are fundamentally our own worst enemy. We are the weakest link in any of these equations, because it doesn't matter what the manipulator or the con artist or the abuser or the predator does. It matters what you do in response to it. And if you're so wise and aware of what's happening around you, then you've got no excuses to be not responding in a mature and appropriate fashion. Basically, what I'm saying is, don't sit there, pretend to be dumb and naive and woe is me, I'm a victim. So there'll be a little bit of hopefully inspiration, as well as facing some uncomfortable things about our individual selves we might not like. But this isn't to sort of dwell into the learned helplessness that we are quickly cultivating, but to inspire, encourage you to fight back, and to fight back not necessarily at the system, but to fight back more at your own self-delusion. What do you mean self-delusion? I'm not deluded. But are you sure? So it's great to see people are in the chat. I won't particularly be following it too closely. I can never really keep up with it anyway. And I apologize if there is a background noise. I'm a bit backlogged with some work. It has to run, but it should finish, hopefully, if all goes well, in an hour. And if it doesn't go well, it'll be less than an hour. So it occurred to me, I was working on a couple of different sort of ideas, and it made me realize I can mash them together. So we're going to be covering a few different pointers, as it were. Let's get a picture up on the screen. Oh, let me just check. Yay, I've got an avatar. Okay, present, share screen. Oh, not like that. First of all, I need to open up my file. Oh dear. Double clicking things and maximizing windows when I don't want to be maximizing windows. Sorry, I'm a little out of practice. Yeah, I did say before, or in my community tab, I was apologizing for delays. It's this Easter holiday, but this evening I've got a little bit of time, so I felt to share this. All right, there we go. Little misery guts, locked away, the brain. So I haven't fleshed this out fully properly, but I will ask the question, are you out of your mind? Now, how many of you will say no to this? Because what does it sort of infer? No, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy? So I'm sure many people be like, no, I'm not out of my mind. I'm sure of what's what. I know what time of day it is. And some of you might say yes in a sort of like, ha ha ha, I'm Google bananas. I see JR. Yes, I've always been crazy. Yeah, you might say it in a kind of cutesy sort of way. But when we say such a thing, could it not be that it is actually showing the inner workings of the mind, and this sentiment of yes, I am crazy, mockingly, tongue in cheek, is actually an introjection which is being externalized. So this is actually insane. Like comedic. I am crazy. You're actually revealing that no, you are inside your mind, and what is inside tends to spill outwards. Because if this were indeed true, let's say you were, fruity bananas or whatever, Fruity Loops, then what you would be saying is that none of us should really take you seriously or listen to anything. We should avoid you because you're crazy. So there is a kind of little game, little dance here, where someone may say, "I'm a little bit unhinged" in a comedic fashion, in order to cover up any mistakes that they know subconsciously or semi-aware or not that they're going to make. So basically, forgive me, Father, for my sins, kind of thing. Like, now give me a free pass. I'm allowed to make mistakes now because I have given you the plea for an exemption, and provided you accept it, I'm off the hook. So I can no longer be responsible for any mess ups that I may do. So I can get away with murder if I want to, because I'll be like, well, I did say I was crazy, right? The responsibility gets passed on to the other person to be like, hey, don't worry about it. So that question, come back to that question again. So are you out of your mind? Let's work it out. Which would be what's the signifier of saying such a thing? See, if when we say, well, to tack on to the end of that other bit, because if you were to say yes, like in a comedic fashion, and the audience, the observer, accepts this, this is what we would deem as enabling and allowing them to continue without any restraint or self-control or have any accountability. Because if you were truly outside of your mind, then you would see that this behavior isn't really cool or acceptable, and you would start to make adjustments. Hence why we call it self-reflection. You see yourself, and to see yourself, you have to be outside of yourself. So although the expression "are you out of your mind" normally means like, are you crazy, it's actually a good thing, because if you are wanting to self-reflect, you need to be outside of your mind. Otherwise, you are like this poor little brain locked inside the prisons, the iron bars of your skull. And so how else would you get to see perspective of your behavior and your thinking processes if you are stuck in that mind prison without any perspective? And as a result, you will not be able to see the delusions you are creating, because it's like seeing the forest through the trees. You are so embedded in that delusion, you cannot, inside that prison cage, the outside world does not exist. Reality does not exist. You are trapped inside where your delusions are born, inside your own mind. So it is important to free your mind to be able to be outside of your mind. And so this, as the subject title, are you out of your mind? Normally, we would think like, you know, you don't want to be like that. So we can see on a sort of cultural, colloquial level, it is encouraged that you be inside your mind where your delusions are born. And also you have that kind of other expression of being present in mind. But to be present in mind is also the self-awareness of the landscape you are traversing. To know that the mind is a place of soft ground in a way. It's like walking on a cloud of candy floss. It is prone to distortions, misinterpretations, a lack of perception, blind spots, awarenesses, and things like that. So inside the mind is not really a true reflection of objective reality. It's like being aware that you are dreaming. And so when you are aware, I don't know if you experience it when you're dreaming and you're aware that you're dreaming, you can kind of feel safe, because in the process of dreaming, you can toy with ideas and experiment with things in the safety that it is a mirage, an illusion. It isn't real. So that's one of the reasons they suggest the purpose of why do we dream is so that we can exercise and practice and put some of our theories and thinkings into a kind of simulation test to see how well it jives, and then we can extrapolate that into reality when we wake up. So we see this kind of quirky relationship between what is outside and what is inside the head, in the mind. Because you might say, well, why would you ever want to be living inside your mind then, if reality is what counts at the end of the day? Well, the trouble is that, you know, pros and cons. Inside the mind, you have the creativity, you have the imagination, you have the ability to try things you wouldn't risk otherwise. Whereas in reality, you know, you only get one shot. If you make a mistake, or maybe not one shot, but if you make a mistake, it could have dire consequences. So usually inside the head as well, you'll see a lack of critical self-judgment, even though you might counter argue and say, what about like an inner critic, self-hate, self-loathing? Where these are the sort of bolt-on additional variables to factor in as we go through. The point I'm trying to make is that as much as we like to think we're clear-minded, we see things accurately, and we know what time of day it is and what's what, and we got all the facts and figures. In truth, not really. We have to constantly remind ourselves of our own subjectivity, our biases, our prejudices, and have the honesty to acknowledge them, and whether or not then to decide if we are going to enable said now becoming a delusion, belief, or are we going to do things that are contrary to it, which might, from a surface level, not make us feel good. Because part of delusion being created inside the mind, delusion isn't created in reality. Is this delusion provides a form of comfort. It's relief. It's, even though, let's say we use an example of the world is coming to an end as a delusion, You might think this is catastrophic. This is a heavily negative delusion. The fact of having the so-called truth of what is to come brings a relief, because we fear the unknown. So we create a boogeyman in order to make ourselves feel so that we can focus our anxiety. And so I'm coming at this delusion now, explaining the functionality of how it's created in a backwards sort of way. So we see that it grows from the fertilizer of anxiety, of worry and concern and stresses. And as it grows, it takes a form. And then when it takes a form, we can kind of put our finger on it and be like, right, that is why my life feels the way it does, or this is why I see the things that I see. And these delusions become beliefs. You don't really need any facts at this point. You just need to have the belief, the conviction. I feel that this is right. That's good enough for me. And this is why, if you're unable to step outside of your mind, you'll be drinking the Kool-Aid and have no awareness. Why would you wake up from this delusion when it's bringing you relief from your anxiety, your depression and stresses and things like that? It starts to become so embellished, so fabricated, that it provides you all the answers you could have ever hoped for, to such an extent where it's such creative story writing. And remember, we're saying creativity is inside the mind, not in reality. It's such creative story writing that it's bigger than life itself. It has more vibrancy, but it's so colorful. You have an answer for everything. There are no mysteries anymore when you have a delusion. And you can see how therapeutic, in a way, delusion becomes, because it puts it's the answer to life in a way, but it's a delusion. It's not really the answer to life. It's just how you've managed to reorganize bits of information to quell your anxiety. And so your delusion is tailor-made to suit you, as imaginative as it may be, as preposterous as you might want to suggest. Let's say you're talking about, we are dealing with, I don't know, AI robotic lizard people from Alpha Centauri. But it's perfect. It feels that part of your satisfaction to a T. And so these delusions start to gain mass. And with this mass and the ability to spin things around, to re-augmentate, to customize whenever the time is needed, like moving goalposts. Let's say someone comes along and tries to criticize one of your beliefs. You will quickly be able to, with the power of delusion, be able to, or damage control and things like, other kind of sort of distortion tactics, manipulative sort of tactics. One of the, not just manipulating the other person, but manipulating yourself into being able to perpetuate this belief, this diehard attitude, like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Only I know the truth. I am the truth seeker, as it were, or I'm a truther. It's funny how they all got their own individual truths, eh? And so whatever lie or concoction is now transmorphed into being factual without the need of any actual facts. It's quite a marvelous feat. But again, it's a reflection of how dire the situation really is, how trauma. I don't want, maybe not trauma. How devastating the anxiety is that someone has to go to these leaps and bounds of magical thinking that being inside the mind again. Magical thinking isn't in reality. That's more logical base. Oh, I'm so sorry about the noise. That is a 3D printer. Sorry, I'm backlogged with some prints. So and it's running at full kilt. So if I slowed it down, it could be a little bit quieter. But look, it says 39% processed. So maybe another half hour. I really, let me move. I'll try and move my mic further away. Not that I think it's really going to help all that much. Yes, I apologize for the noise. Be grateful I haven't got both my printers running. Sorry about that. So we're following along anyway. Is Billy on his deathbed? Yes, maybe it could be. It puts me on my knees sometimes. The printer does need rebuilding, and I'm not really looking forward to having to do that. It is because it's palaver. But yeah. See, normally I try to do the streams around, like I'll print during the day and I'll try and do the streams, when the machine is off. But unfortunately, some of these things, it's not going to be a regular thing. Don't worry. I'll try to make sure I'm not running it simultaneously next time. Yeah, I'm sure it is irritating. So I hope we're beginning to see that life, a person's perspective, is very much influenced in ways we don't conventionally think of, or we put these ideas to the back of our minds and they become they're aloof, and as a result, because we have this sort of blind spot to this whole or denial as well as a big one, it can wreak havoc in the background if it isn't kept in check. And again, going back to the title as a reminder, which is why the importance of actually being out of your mind can be very beneficial to give you that objective perspective. And sometimes you need a friend to tell you where maybe you're going a bit off the rails or something like that. The next challenge is whether or not you're going to listen to your friend or tell them to F off. And so with that kind of sentiment, it goes back to this at the beginning. We were talking about despite society collapsing, and from what we see from the objective reality, there are signs that suggest this. It still comes down to, well, what are you as an individual going to do about it? Are you going to bitch and moan, or are you actually going to be like productive and get on with things? So you need to have that kind of, in the grand scheme of things, what is the most appropriate course of action? Do you take the information that you don't really want to hear, taxes, inflation going up, and your freedoms are being lost, and do you embellish and exaggerate and start saying they're going to be putting explosive collars around our necks and we should all, I don't know, evacuate to planet Mars? Or it's like, calm down. Now who's being more insane? Who's being ridiculous? Even if it was true, like how even if going to Mars would be the safe bet, how on earth are you going to be able to do that? So come on, be a bit realistic, even if you are desperate. Because the delusion is a slippery slope. And from being anxious at first to then being fearful, you now start to become erratic. You become hypersensitive. You become impulsive, reactive, catastrophically. Someone says good morning to you and you punch their lights out because you think they're trying to pinch your pocket, or they're being a smart ass with you and insulting you in some way, when really they're just being mundane, because you've got this fight or flight mode kicking in and there's nowhere for you to run. This is partly what the delusion is about. It's escapism. So you become more likely very aggressive, very confrontational, very hostile. You become unreliable. You don't have any. You can't trust things around you. So you yourself become untrustworthy. You can't even trust yourself anymore. You don't know who you are anymore. Your identity is fracturing increasingly as you progress deeper and deeper in your delusion. And so you implant this idea of being the one. I am the one and only who knows the real truth. And if only these fools around me would understand my greatness. And so we see this ego inflation. And it's all stemming from this neuroticism of anxiety, of being unable to cope with what is happening around, and escaping deeper inside the mind. So the prison becomes home. It becomes comfortable, to the point where if the door was open, you wouldn't even want to step out of the safety of your prison bars, because you've now got delusion on your side, which explains everything, that empowers you, that comforts you. Why would you abandon that? What, to step out in the harshness of reality? It's preposterous. So you won't do it. So you will embrace. You'll actually you'll with a fondness, because the delusion starts to become exciting, because you're finding out the so-called truth. What have I found today? I found another bit of nuggets, and I can put that with this piece as well. And aren't I a clever so-and-so, and everything else. So this delusion brings about a sense of euphoria, power. It makes you believe you are bigger than life. Well, I was saying that the dream is bigger than life itself, but you are part of that dream. So you become like, your grandiosity increases. And as I was also saying at the beginning, like this introjection, like the mind is only so big, right? So it starts to overflow and spill out into the world. And even though you might have these beliefs inside your head, that's not good enough. You have to now overlay your fantasy on top of reality, and force, or try to force, or control reality to bend the knee to your delusion. Because as long as reality outside remains as it is, it clashes. It's the obstacle from your fantasy completely taken over, from becoming actual reality. You can't have two realities at the same time. So this town ain't big enough for the both of us, so one's gonna have to go, and it ain't gonna be your fantasy. So it has to be overlaid on top of reality. So what's inside your head, your mental illness, there is no restraints. It's going to start to seep out. It's going to become uncontained and vomit over reality, and try to shackle and imprison the external world, just like you are inside your internal world. Now, take what I'm saying here and apply it to your own experiences of what you see around you. Do you see any parallels going on? Do you see signs or symptomology of what I'm describing? You go, hey, I recognize some of what Billy is saying there. Yeah, there does seem to be a vomiting on top of reality, and a expectation that you must believe what the other person believes, and if you don't, you're an offender. And it's like, whoa, what happened to my individualistic freedoms of my own opinion? So I'm not even entitled to my own opinions. I have to believe in yours. I mean, we call this it's a bit like cannibalizing. It's consuming. You are being You know the movie The Thing, the monster, The Thing. So it'll be like that. You know, you are being sucked into this hive-minded way of thinking, because being stuck inside your head is a lonely place. Only you reside there. So it helps to embellish the lie if there are other people in support of this narrative, which you start to see characteristics of recruitment going on. And so recruitment isn't so much a process of building your ranks, so now you're an army. It's more of a case of enter a shared psychosis, shared delusion. And it's not really for your benefit, it's for this person who is propagating it, who is at the center. You see how they're at the center? They created a delusion. They are the god of this world, of this landscape, and you are the participants helping to support as fuel and supply the validation. And if you don't, you are exiled or ejected or character assassinated, or you are compartmentalized, or you are dealt with in some shape or form, so that the threat of your existence to this fantasy is well, not even minimized, is eradicated. So you'll see elements of it's never good enough, you know, even though you might ghost or go your own separate ways, you'll hear your name being spoken in the breeze, you know, in the wind. They haven't forgotten. The narcissist holds a grudge, you know, that kind of thing. So your spirit, that's why the problem with no contact is that it's the minimal, really. You know, the mentally ill have no boundaries. So even in death, you do not escape. They can slander your name, for instance, and you'll be powerless to do it. They can dance on your grave. How are you going to stop them? Right. So, so as the delusion as a coping strategy for all this problematic turmoil develops and grows. It's being nurtured. It's being cultivated, but it's being fed and watered as a plant grows. The weeds, and it provides, it's like a shield, form of protection, and the mind can transfer, the individual can transfer the responsibility of their self-care, which really they should be dealing with themselves. They haven't, for whatever reasons, they haven't developed these coping strategies, but they can put their faith and trust into this delusion. Hence why it's much more of a belief system and structure. And it's the only thing that they can really be sure of, because it's something of their own creation. And being able to modify it at whim means that if you look at it plotted over time, from their perspective, it was never wrong, because every time it was wrong, it was reaugmentated to be right again. They'll be like, please explain this contradiction. And then with the magical thinking, they can come up with whatever justification to try and palm it off, because they don't have to convince you. It's the ability to try and fool themselves. And we see at this point, fooling themselves into a lie is very easy, because it's what they want. They want to be able to dream. They want this dream to be true. And they do not want it not to be true. So it doesn't have to make sense at all. It could be absolutely absurd. Doesn't matter. It's kind of like you were conned before you even conned. It's like, just take my money. It's like, but I haven't even tricked you yet. I know you're going to trick me, but never mind that. Just just take my. I want to give you my money. And in a funny little way, see, because from their perspective, like only they can see that. To them, this is the truth. I see the truth, and only I see the truth, and they're so convinced of it. And in a funny way, it's kind of true. The trouble is it's that my truth thing. It's a reality to them, and this is how they're seeing it. So the momentum at which this delusion is being fabricated at haste and speed now, it's kind of like taking a life of its own. It's become bigger in a way, in some regards, than the person themselves. And because it provides protection, the person becomes, in a way, a white knight to their own cause. They won't care how detrimental their situation is, provided that they still have this delusion to protect them. So they don't mind incurring injury, for instance, provided that the delusion will protect against the outside intervention. So they're a white knight. So they'll champion their belief, or like hold it on a banner and wave the flag. So they are beneath this overarching narrative, even though it's something of their creation. So they still have that kind of God complex, but they can pass off the responsibility or the accountability of creating it and be like, no, I didn't create this narrative. No, this is beyond me. I just spotted it. I just figured it out. And the more of a objective it becomes for them to force this belief onto other people. So it's like, don't you see? Let me explain it to you. Now we could be on the same page, kind of thing. Like now you're on my team, and well, this is the shared psychosis or shared delusion. But this element of if you look out for this expectation that you must believe what someone else is telling you, that, and they'll say it's for your good. I'm letting you know so that you could be aware, just like me, but really, no, they want you to be aware so that you could be part of this, so you can help support the structure of this narrative that is being formed. Because if it were, sometimes you hear they'll say things like, look, I'm going to go off grid, or I'm going to go solo. But yet here they are. So it's like, what, did you forget something? It's like, bye-bye, see you later. Like, we're all idiots according to you. Go on then. You're the enlightened one. Go do your ascend to heaven then. Off you go. So it's like, why are you still here? I thought us mere mortals were inferior and don't deserve to go to heaven or whatever. So you see, there's an ulterior motive going on. They won't go to heaven or ascend into spirituality or wherever it is that they're telling everyone they're going without you. You see the dependency start to emerge. And that's a lesson from, the manipulator will at some point reveal their hand. You just got to give it time. But true motives start to become apparent because they need to. It's like, how am I gonna covertly get what I want without saying it at some point? What am I? So I have this expectation that you're gonna read my mind and just, that's how long is that game gonna last before they kind of want to cut the chase and be like, no, look, just give me I just want the keys to your car. It's like, oh, why didn't you say so? Gee, now I know you're trying to steal my car. Like, I didn't want to have to blatantly say it like that, but yeah, I want to steal your car. It's like, right, you revealed the mask has slipped, because the mask becomes increasingly heavy over time, and eventually it will slip, revealing what's truly underneath. Now, what that is depends. Maybe they're after validation, maybe they're after money, maybe they're after companionship, maybe they're after whatever, Now, so we've been largely talking about the individualistic slippery slope into delusion. Now, how does this translate into more societal impact? We have shared psychosis, shared delusion. Now we're talking about mass psychosis. And so when you start to have multiple people, communities, with the inability to cope anymore, things are constantly changing, everything is unstable, there is uncertainty, there is anxiety left, right, and center, a huge amount of fear, a lot of rage, a lot of panic, then each of these are signals. They are stressors. And just like for the individual where there's nowhere to escape, if there are no solutions, then the individuals within the community start to escape inside their mind. And you see how they start to become a contagion effect. So crowd psychology starts to become a contagion and spread. And the magical thinking, with the delusions spilling out of the containment of their head, someone who is a vulnerable person hearing this will be like, Eureka, you're right. I didn't see it before like that. Thank you for giving me this enlightenment. Now I'm a believer, just like you, and I have got freedom. So there is, unfortunately, for the bystanders or the additional people, if they are emotionally vulnerable, they will be susceptible to being sold the lie as well, because it grants them security. So dangerous cocktail developing. And you conflate this with things like the poor, distorted senses. You can't accurately understand science anymore. To you, it's a complete marvel why there is a sun in the sky, and flat Earth or whatever, or clouds. How do clouds stay up in the sky? You have poor judgment. You're making rash decisions, and it's not really doing you any favors. It's only increasing the vulnerability. The more deluded, the more extreme in your delusions you become. And unfortunately, this is the brain simply trying to survive and cope. Remember, the purpose of your brain isn't to be your friend in any real way. It's to keep you alive. It doesn't really care if it's keeping you alive with sanity or insanity. Whatever does the job of keeping you alive. And if insanity is working better at giving you meaning, as humans we need meaning. So if insanity is providing that meaning for you because you can't figure it out being sane, it's just beyond you, maybe a lack of education or something like that, or disbelief. It's like my car now compared to my old one is magic. It's full of so many electrical components. I don't know how it does the things that it does. Well, I do somewhat now, having spent the time to actually research and learn it. But as a casual observer, I'd be like, this doesn't make mechanical sense to me, you know. And that's because it's more electronical now. But magical thinking. So the brain is actually working how it should be working, right? It can't make sense of a logical world, but it can make sense of a magical one. So why not make a magical world then? It helps to keep you alive and for you to survive. It's doing its job, as self-destructive as it may be ultimately in the end, but nevertheless. And on top of this, we'll see things like, so you've got the hostility, you'll be primed for rage, outbursts of anger. Where do we see this happening? Look in your communities and you'll see elements of paranoia, most likely. And you guessed it, the increase in a person's narcissism will start to emerge, will come to the surface. Now, those of you who'd be like, I'm not a narcissist, bafooey, I say to you, because you all have inherently this narcissistic fail-safe switch inside you, where all else fails, you will become a narcissist. Because what else is going to keep you alive? That's why narcissism is a survival defense mechanism, and it's also delusional. So we're almost coming full circle here. So when things are collapsing and anxiety is increasing and all the rest of it, and you're invulnerable, you're becoming more and more narcissistic. Boom! Now we've got a whole nother plethora of criteria to add to it. You know, I mean, I brushed a little bit on denial, but yeah, and the grandiosity, because you are the one bestowed with all this higher knowledge. Anyway, now not only is this fantasy landscape growing and becoming embellished, and it's attractive as well, even though it might paint a grisly picture, there is a sort of satisfaction and relief from it. So it's still an attraction, like it's better than complete oblivion of the unknown. That's more spooky and scary. But not only is it trying to overlay on top of reality starts to fade away until all that is left. The goal is all that is left is this delusional story. And as such, you escape inside your mind where the delusions live. You become less in touch with reality. You might say this is a psychotic break. Because like borderline, for example, you're out of touch with reality. And you don't have a problem with this because reality is unexplainable and causes injury. So you're like, good, I want to be out of touch with reality. You know, this is if you're embracing magical thinking. But what makes it even more tricky is that it's not exactly out of touch reality in the sense that reality no longer exists and you're just completely batshit crazy off the rails. It's more of a case of a mutation of reality. I said before that fantasy is overlaid on top of reality. It has reality as its foundation. It takes elements of reality and twists and distorts it into something that fantasy can utilize. So when we talk about a psychotic break, it's not a complete break as in now you are just completely off the rails, you don't know anything anymore, you're what it like completely balmy. It's you're you're restructuring, you're making a mash, you're taking reality and fantasy and you're mashing them together to make a love child. So that's why a good lie has a sprinkle of truth in there. So this makes the fantasy that much more believable because it takes elements from reality. So to some degree, the fantasy actually does work. It still follows the mechanics of reality to a certain point. The trouble is, it's kind of like picking and choosing and what's convenient. But that makes it more troublesome when trying to discern whether or not someone is being delusional or not, because there'll be times when they actually make some sense and you'd be like, I don't know, like sometimes they sound crazy, sometimes it sounds like a harebrained scheme, but then at other times they're actually saying something which makes sense. Now this contrast is already a clue that basically they're not saying it because it's true, they're saying it because it serves the purpose of sustaining the fantasy. So even though they are sort of technically speaking facts occasionally, it's not because of a true conviction of believing in. It's being used. It's being abused to facilitate another reason, another purpose. So if you're on the fence with someone like that, you can kind of surmise that they're leaning more into the delusional sort of spectrum rather than someone who is logical, rational, and they just got a few eccentric ideas. Maybe that's the case, but you need to develop that discernment to be able to tell: are their feet, are they standing in reality as much as possible, or are they standing in fantasy, or what? Like one foot in each realm or something. Okay. So we're beginning to now slip into the contagious aspects and how this starts to spill out into society. Now, this might make a few of the more magically minded conspirator thinking people a bit happy, but so some of their observations you can see as probably being in the right direction, maybe embellished, but in the right direction. We start thinking about the more capitalistic who want to prey, the predators who want to prey on these vulnerable people. Because as this contagion spreads, you'll have a society that is now becoming weaker. A great time for a totalitarian to want to impose power and control and enslave the population. And it's not going to be much effort on their part. They don't really need to do much. They just need to keep the wheel spinning. So a little bit of fear here, a little bit of fear there. Have it in waves of fear and oh, we have a solution. We have the cure. Don't worry, everybody. You can trust us. Us, we the government, we love you. We care for you. We have the answer. Oh, everyone hide because here comes the next boogeyman, the next enemy. So it's easy for them to direct to shake up the ground beneath these vulnerable, susceptible people. And so, to skip a few beats here, we can, well, maybe I'm being a bit quick, but we could say that we could use the example that narcissists like to, they're quite often looked at as air quote successful, like business entrepreneurial type, psychopaths. They do well in companies because they're ruthless and don't really care. In the household, they breed. They like their children to be dependents of sorts, and a borderline is quite a good one for a narcissist. Now, that's not exactly true. It's just a sort of observation which has a bit of a tendency that borderlines experience or come from or have exposure to narcissism. And so we can look at the overlords in a way as the narcissistic parent, like daddy government, and the population as the borderline children. So we are a little bit mistaken when we say that society is turning narcissistic. Well, maybe I'm a little bit mistaken because I sort of vouch for that or whatever. Really, we are seeing characteristics of borderline taking place. So if you want to understand the interactions people are having on a sort of communal lower tier level, then instead of throwing the word narcissist around as slurs to one another, you should really be thinking of more borderline. And I'll go into why I say that in a little moment. I want to cover a little bit more into this contagion aspect of mass psychosis, and why it's important to fight back, to have that resistance internally within you, so that not only do you not fall prey, I've got kind of hiccups, not only do you fall prey to the manipulation, the propaganda, but you can help other people find the courage to fight back as well. I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of like bystander syndrome, and we have normalcy bias as well, where bad behavior starts to become the norm and so on, so no one challenges it and becomes acceptable when morally this is obscene. So there needs to be a strong degree of, this is going to be a double-edged sword here. There needs to be confidence and resilience and all this sort of fortitude within to be able to say no to all of this sort of stuff. Now, be careful of confidence, because next to it, if not careful, will be arrogance. So someone who is confident can make mistakes, and they could be big, they could be devastating mistakes. They're not exercising caution. And this is the trouble, because for a lot of this self-reflection, going back to this, are you out of your mind and things like that, it requires, on top of everything else, like honesty being a big one, it requires time and patience, and knowing what your limitations are, understanding that it's you that needs to make these big alterations if ever you were to hope other people are going to do the same thing. And for the weaker, they will be relying on you to be able to have that self-discipline. So it really does come back down to you as an individual, like what it is you'll decide, like how you want to proceed. You can't have the you can't place that expectation or that responsibility on other people and hope they are going to see things your way. And in a way, this is like a siege of a bombardment of little infliction, little wounds that manipulate. They wear you down. They find the chink in your armor. So repetition and being overloaded carries it burdens you with more. It wears you down in a way, so you'll be more likely to bend the knee. You know, if like imagine a kid persistently nagging you, "Oh, please, can we have McDonald's? Please, can we have and then eventually you cave in. You know, enough. You know, so it's that kind of torture to extract what it is they want from you. And so I suppose you could say, in the immediate instance, therefore, what one should do when they hear BS or they know something ain't right is you do not allow them the chance to even speak. Do not let them utter a word, because you already know it is corrupted. That's the importance of the no contact type of thing. You keep the communication down to a minimal if you have to, you know, otherwise you remove it completely. Now, when you have conflicting ideologies or beliefs clashing with one another, it becomes a competition. And unfortunately, I don't really see many people weighing up the pros and cons. They're not really looking at bullet points here. What it's coming down to is relying on the weight of emotional reaction. So basically, who is putting on the better show wins. You know, who can get the most laughs wins. Who can make the biggest, the bestest puns. Who can be most charismatic. The popularity contest. That is taking the precedence over actually looking at the pros and cons and tallying up the information. So I would suggest a INTJ to deal with such matters in a more logical way. And this is why it's no good saying to people like, look, everyone just turn off your phone or get off the internet or go for a walk in nature, be one in nature. Because none of those, you know, they preach it because they know it will be good, but they're hypocritical because they're not going to do it, are they? You know they're not going to do it. They might say they've done it, but give it a week and they're back on it. So why is this the case? It's because going into nature for a walk or turning off your phone doesn't bring any resolution. Remember, these people need answers. We need this peace of mind, this comfort. You know, so no one really likes medicine that's actually good for them, right? So going into nature, turning off your phone, instead of being like, we know theoretically this is what we should do, but it actually increases the anxiety. Because what if you miss something? What if you miss that notification? You know, so this is that survival instinct of I need to know immediately everything because I'm in such jeopardy that is crucial or critical to me surviving. So this is why people aren't going to turn off their phone or go for a walk in nature. It's only going to increase their anxiety because they are already hooked at this point. We're already addicts. You know, say to someone who's on drugs, oh, what you need to do is not take the, it's like, it's preposterous. They'll be like, what? That's going to make me feel worse. Like, no, it's good for you. It's like, well, okay, I know it's good for me, but I ain't looking forward to that one. But someone who is a bit more mature will understand that, yeah, this is going to be very uncomfortable. It needs, despite how I might feel, it needs to be done. And so you step outside your mind. You almost step outside your body as well. But this brings up the point that the more distracted and disrupted from living a normal life, the easier it is to control, to have power over you, to enslave you, and you'll buy into it. You'll willingly do it, which means logically it is that much more important that you get on with your life regardless of what shit is happening around you. It's going to take an effort to be able to compartmentalize the drama and be like, you know what, despite the society collapsing, despite digital currency, despite hyperinflation, you know what, I'm still going to enjoy this pizza tonight. I'm not going to be a doomer gloomer eating my pepperoni or something like that. And that is the fight of the rebels, the resistance. There you go. Little acts like that. You living your life regardless, because this is reality existing in the face of the impeding fantasy that's looming overhead, that wants you to stop what you're doing and entertain the fantasy. And this is like, no, I'm gonna do what I want to do. So it is a strong effort and a dedication. And you must resist the temptation of the Faustian deal with the devil, the promise of salvation or solution. Who is supplying you with this promise? It's your captor, and you really think that this is going to be the Holy Grail? Of course not. It's going to be the nail in the coffin, and and if by chance you finally twig what happened, it'd be far too late. Right, there we go. The print is finished, so it should be a bit quieter. So thank you for bearing with the background noise. So when the elites are offering a solution, like, don't worry, everybody, we're going to have digital currency, or we're going to have low pollution, we're going to save the climate change, whatever, what this really is an invitation for you to accept and enter. It's for you to sign on the line of the shared totalitarian psychosis. For you choose to obey, and this is your commitment. It's like, okay, you give me this pseudo solution, answer, I obey. Here's my signature. And of course, because the way things have been going, everything's burning down in flames. At least for the time being, you're going to see this offer as the way out of your calamity. And so the act of signing is fawn. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. You don't know who to fight. You're told the enemy is all around you. You're told that your brother and sister is your enemy. Eventually, you yourself become the enemy. You don't know where to run. You've got nowhere to. You've already escaped into the delusion, but you can't really escape there because the terror is following you. Freezing isn't really doing much good, and now here comes the overlords offering you a way out, and it's to make them happy by signing. So you fawn. And this is where we're seeing people on a societal level terrorized, where they are so disorientated that they are choosing the fawn response, signing over the rights to their lives and freedom in the hope of a salvation and the safety of the shared psychosis, or mass psychosis. So very precarious stuff we're covering here. And this isn't to make you feel like, oh no, what's the point of it all? I give up, Billy. This is diabolic. It can be if you so choose to let it be. This is why it comes back down to you. What do you want? Do you want to bend the knee? Or do you want to be able to, like, damn, I need to start taking self-ownership, self-control. I need to start being accountable for myself and stop expecting other people to bail me out or help me or to co-sign on maybe my beliefs that are now being questioned, So I spoke before. So this is I think the dynamics we're beginning to see with the mass psychosis and runaway delusion taking place. It's a relationship between the overlords and the well, I don't want to say peasants, but the underlings, and there's also a relationship between the external and internal. We see this push and pull dynamic, a little bit black and white as well, unfortunately, but we're looking for something in between. So let's cover a little bit about this borderline thing. Now, why would I say this instead of just saying everyone's is turning into a narcissist? Because the criteria lines up better. I mean, there could be other factors. It could be comorbid. It could be other, anxiety disorders and things like that. But I think to mention borderline in particular gives us another sort of lens perspective to see the situation. So I think it's fair to say that we have some form of identity crisis going on. No one knows who they are anymore. People are holding up banners for different things. You've got this woke ideology, you've got feminine, you've got political identities, group identities, you've got racial, you've got sexual, you've got trans, you've got men, women. I mean, everyone is clutching for some kind of identity, anything at this point. And the person who struggles with identity, an unstable one at that, is a borderline. Now, a narcissist has a false identity, but at least it's more stable compared to the borderline. When we look at who causes the most emotional damage, like comparing the narc and the borderline, it's the borderline. Who is it that experiences emptiness the most? It's the borderline, And so we start to see borderline used to be looked at as an individual, like a person with borderline, but because of this contagion aspect, there's almost like a culture of borderline being grown, where it starts to form tribalism as a form of as a response to the fear of abandonment. Fear of abandonment, borderline. So when people talk about the great the screaming, the explosive emotional rage and anger, Yes, the narcissist has a meltdown, but when the borderline, it's something else, you know. So the great re is, in a way, the expression of the borderline's intense anger and rage taking over. You know, this is why the borderline is the one who will stab you literally with a knife, because their emotions are up and down and all over the place. And where we see people like look in the communities, and 1 minute communities are proud of themselves, and then the next minute they're angry and up in arms, and then the next minute they're depressed and anxious about the world collapsing. So it's like there is not really much stability in any one community. So with that point about the abandonment, agreed. On top of like latching onto an identity, there is this rejection of the original persona. Look how many people talk about how they try to dissociate from the blue pill. I ain't blue pill anymore, you know. F those guys. But it's like, hang on, like weren't there some nice things about being blue pill, like being integrated, even though you were being duped, you know, and all this sort of stuff, but still, you know, like you felt like you belonged, at least for a time, you know, the friendliness aspect of it, the innocence element, the ignorance is bliss. Those are, so aren't there some nice qualities of blue pill, but that we have this fear of the abandonment kicking in, where it's like, no, I'm going to reject it completely. And then, because this is like talking about the identity, the tribe has a group identity. You know, you identify as the group, the tribe, and inside the individual is lost. We have enmeshment. So this is the enmeshment side of borderline playing out in tribalistic behavior. And if we look at the language in which people are speaking, you're basically going to have, in terms of borderline and narcissism, you're going to have basically two mantras being spoken. You must care for me is something that borderline is after. You know, these will be the words in between the lines that are spoken. Like, I expect you to be responsible for me, account for me. I expect you to make me feel better. I expect you to validate me. So this is caring, right? This is borderline talk. And then the narcissist will be, you must give to me. You know, the entitlement. Like, that belongs. That's mine. That's not yours. You owe me. You don't even exist. You know, that sort of thing. So you must care for me versus you must give to me. I mean, the narcissist also wants care. They want you to look after them, but they don't want to think that they're a child that's like a baby, and that because that makes them vulnerable. That makes them dependent. You know. So you've got the grandiosity of the narcissist who'd be like, no, I ain't a baby. You know, even though I want you to care for me, I ain't going to explicitly say or express it outwardly that I need caring for. That's kind of like the perks of the deal here. You still need to give to me primarily. I need that supply. Give me supply. You know. Now, here's an interesting point about the identity again. So a narcissist will we talk about chameleons, right? Or a wolf in sheep's clothing or something like that. So a narcissist may change their mask, their character. They're like an actor, right? They're playing a role. So they might change their mask in order for their false identity, or the mask is their false identity. The ego is behind the mask, but it's to cover up and keep the ego like underneath So this is why they've got a stable identity in a way, even though they wear a mask. That's just a superficial surface. That's the interface where the exchange with other people can take place. But the borderline, with their poor boundaries, have a disabled sense of self, right? And so they are more prone to adopt other people's beliefs as their own. And you see how that relates to this shared delusion. Because if you've got people who are more borderline than they are narcissists, that means a person's belief will spread much more easily like wildfire and be adopted by other people, and they will hold up this belief as their own, because they don't have any, because they got no identity of their own, they have no beliefs of their own. So this makes the borderline much more impressionable, much more vulnerable in a way than a narcissist. The narcissist, despite not liking boundaries, has very rigid boundaries. You can't tell a narcissist that they're not the greatest, that they're a complete clown. They won't tolerate that, you know. So the stubbornness of a narcissist, to some degree, well, this is why it's a disorder of protection. It protects them, so they can't be swayed as easily as a borderline can. So you combine these elements together, this makes a borderline society far more dangerous than a narcissistic society, because you've got emotionally extreme, neurotic, impressionable people, savages if you're not careful, you know. Let's look at it the other way. Let's say if we were indeed dealing with a narcissistic society. Now, we know that narcissism has no particular cure, right? That would mean that society is pretty much doomed. There's no cure in it. If we say, however, that society is more of a borderline style, then we have things like CBT therapy, right? The cognitive behavioral therapy, which they say helps borderlines, you know, and can be of use. Which really does then put the pressure on the field of psychology to pull their socks up, because without treatment, the borderline is far more dangerous than a narcissist, in my opinion, anyway. Much more damaging. I mean, both are bad. Don't get me wrong, but the extent is far-reaching. So it's very important that not only do we make an effort to have our individualisms and integrity, it's also important to have out-of-mind perspective, to self-reflect, truly self-reflect. I don't mean it in this like, oh yeah, I self-reflect and no, you're BSing me. I know you are. And to acknowledge that a load of therapeutic sort of treatment is required, even for the person who isn't a borderline. Those in a relationship with a borderline or a narcissist will need counseling as well. You know, those who you would consider as neurotypically healthy, but they've been in a relationship, or they've had the exposure or proximity to a narcissist. Maybe they've got a boss or something like that, or they've got family members who have those conditions. Even the healthy will need therapy, which basically means everyone is going to need to. We all need education. We all need awareness. We all need to develop coping strategies and have other ways of dealing with our anxieties and stresses, and to be resistant to the persuasion of corrupt and a mostly bankrupt and evildoers. So there's a lot of work. Otherwise, well, it's going to be a bumpy ride. You better all buckle in. So I think I'm going to leave it about there. I feel like it's been a pretty intense conversation. I'm going to assume the chat has been cool, and as long as the chat has been cool, we'll keep it open, next time. Where is my window? There's so many windows open. I'm like, where do I exit the broadcast? Right. So, any comments, questions, whatever, please feel free to leave it in the doobly-doo down below. Please give the video a like. It does help. If you want to donate, that'd be mucho appreciated. And all that good stuff. I don't know what else. So take care. Until next time. Have a good think. All right. Good night.